Broker Daily Business Accelerator. Surefire strategies and proven techniques to fast-track your broking business.
Welcome back. Great to have you with us. Alex Whitlock, Jason back with you. Business Accelerator. I feel like a bit of a stranger to my own show.
Well, Alex, it's great to have you back. We had Phil step up. He did an amazing job. You never know what he's going to say, and that's part of the excitement about Phil.
Yeah, it is indeed. It's challenges me to up my game. Phil's a veteran podcaster. He's very good at what he does. He's somebody who can turn his hand to many trades. You know, Phil gets wheeled out for anything from defence through to his main home is smart property investment. He's done that for a long time. He's got a very strong voice in that particular market. But like Phil and I started out working in mortgages media in 2001, and he's my co-host on Broker Daily. So it's good to have yourself and Phil catch up.
I was in safe hands.
So the pressure's on. So we better make this a meaningful podcast and give some good value to our listeners, as we always try to do. I was kind of thinking, Jason, and having had a sort of a break from the podcast for a couple of weeks, and looking at my view of my own business, which of course Phil is my business partner. We have a number of businesses. We've got the media business within which Broker Daily sits. We've got a tech platform called Managed. We have a mortgage broking business called Finny, as well as a research business called Agile. So I find myself this time of year really taking stock of our businesses, of where we're at, of where we're heading, and I also end up sort of taking a little bit of a sort of probably stock of myself personally. I'm 58 this year, and sort of just checking in on myself and seeing if I'm heading the right way. So I don't know if this is relevant. I don't know. You're the man who's connected with brokerages large and small and have been for many years. Is this a relevant kind of focal point for brokers?
It's a funny old time of the year. We bookend the year with dates and events, but 30 June has always been a thing for Australia with our financial tax year, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything from a broker perspective around a particular date. We don't do a lot of interest in advance in this particular industry, especially in the resi space. But it doesn't mean anything from us from a personal and a business perspective. Just like the metaphor around sporting analogy would be. Yeah, at a halftime break, this is the halftime of the year. This is a great time to check back in, have a bit of a checkup, talk to your coach, get some advice and get back on with it for the second half of the year.
I think that's a really good analogy. And if you go back a step, if you look at schools, schools don't do a whole year and then everyone collapses, in December. There's a reason why you go along in chunks and then you reset and you sort of see where you're at now, School children, obviously, in the process of learning, but they're being guided by teachers and other people working in the school to help them to get to where they're going. And I think I like the halftime analogy. And I think taking things in too big a chunks can just be overwhelming. We in our business for our sales targets, we break things into quarters. So for media and for all of the other sales sort of capabilities that we've got. And we get to celebrate at the end of a quarter when we've hit our targets, and sometimes maybe take a long hard look at ourselves and reset for the quarter ahead. But we typically do our major forecasting in 6-month chunks. So we're just entering our obviously the new financial year, but we only forecast up until December. We don't attempt to go all the way through to the next financial year because you know what, it's an awful long way away.
Yeah, there's so much changing these days, and I quite like that linking back to the schools as well. I think about my daughter now, who's she's 20 odd now this year, but when she was younger and getting to the end of a school term, just watching the attitude change, gets tired, a bit surly, and they need a break. And I don't think much of that changes just because we leave school and we get jobs and we start businesses. The human body is not designed to go 24/7, 365. So whether it's a quarterly break for a couple of minutes to check in, or it's the half-yearly checkup, this is a good time to be reflecting on where you've been and obviously where you want to go.
And I think also for running any business, but particularly a mortgage broking business or a mortgage and finance broking business, where even if you want to, you can't clock off at 5:30. Everyone that I know personally in mortgage broking, they have one setting, and it is forward. And I think that if you don't have a bit of a sort of a reset switch, you can end up just in auto mode, just pushing. So look, let's have a focus. Let's have a look at. We'll take a quick break in a couple of seconds. I think we probably set the scene for what we'll go through for this podcast. What I'd like to look at is, if we take an opportunity to have a sort of a reset and a rethink, how do we make that beneficial? Where do we go from there? And what exactly do we look at evaluating? Don't go anywhere. We'll see you in a couple of moments. Welcome back. Jason Back and Alex Whitlock with your Business Accelerator. We are looking at a half-time break, a mid-year break, a reset and a rethink of the business. Your business may be going absolutely sort of firing on 8 cylinders. It may be stalling. It's kind of immaterial. I think there's threats on both sides, Jason. I've myself gone through a period of burnout back in 2017 when I had multiple things, like very, very unwell parents and subsequent death of a parent, a whole load of stuff stacked up. What do I do? Doubled down, pushed on, and had a sort of a full burnout. Now, I didn't actually stop working during that period, but I did find myself in a situation where I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. I actually went and talked to my GP, gave me a lot of reassurance that my world was not coming to an end, but that I needed a reset. So something that I know about personally, about pushing, driving, and trying to juggle multiple things. And life has a funny way of throwing you additional things to deal with as you go along. So, what's your thoughts for, you work very closely with a lot of brokers. So what's your thoughts about that particular positioning?
Look, I think there's a couple of things to think about. One is at this time of year, it's a great opportunity to reflect on, what's going well, but necessarily what might not be going as well as you like in your business. But being a little bit more granular than that as well. Sort of there's probably 4 or 5 things that we'll talk about today that I'd be very keen for business owners and brokers to know those numbers, to understand those markets that they serve, to understand profitability. So we're going to talk about those. But I also think there's a great opportunity to also check back in with, the people around you that matter to you most, whether that's family or friends or it's business partners or whatever it is in your life that you're passionate about, but also to reflect on, how are you going personally? This industry, as you said before, is one that isn't necessarily kind to the clock. We are 24/7, 365, and part of that is what makes the broker proposition incredibly valuable to the end consumer. But we have to find that equilibrium that works for both the business owner, broker, and the consumer. It can't all be one way or the other. So we want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves both professionally but personally. And sometimes I think we forget to put ourselves in that mix, whether that's health, whether it's exercise, whether it's diet, whether it's just downtime. I mentioned to you off air, there's a client of mine that told me the other day that he hadn't had more than 2 days off in the last decade. And my heart broke a little bit.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to work with him and support him to create a model that works for him, but I also have to realize that sometimes as an industry, I think we need to be potentially looking at doing more to support the longevity and sustainability of the industry by looking at, how we license, obviously things like ghostwriting. We can't have locums come in. It's hard when we're giving advice when someone goes on leave and the new broker comes in and who owns that client. And so, we go down a particular rabbit hole. It's not a simple solution, but I think we need to table the conversation that, we can certainly help brokers and business owners understand the health of their business today, but we have to have the conversation of what that looks like to them mentally, physically, emotionally, so that we have a really healthy business for the future.
I think when you're invested into your business, when you're invested into customer outcomes, and when you're passionate and driven, you can end up with a bit, almost like kind of a guilt complex about taking downtime. And it's also kind of quite an addictive thing, And I know you work incredibly hard, you're working all the time. Same for myself, same for Phil. And speaking personally, I can feel a little bit of guilt. I work at weekends. I kind of do things that I want to do it's my business, and I will be working on agendas for conferences or structures for awards, or really looking at Broker Daily and our other brands to see, how they're faring. But the bottom line is I know the feeling of going, I ought to be doing something in my job, and it's a hard thing to break. And I think that to actually step back and take stock, if you have that sort of slight sense of I've got to keep working and I should be working, I can't afford myself to take downtime. And hearing about your friend who's only had a couple of days off. And I know a broker really, really well, very, very, an excellent broker. I will not mention any names, but an extremely successful broker who actually left broking because they just wore themselves out, and they were an outstanding award-winning broker. So I'd say, if you're tuning in, if this maybe resonates with you a little bit, if you're driven and you're looking at success and maybe things are going better than you'd hope for, or maybe things aren't going quite as well as you'd expect. It's you are the driving force in your business, and if you are not able to function in a healthy and balanced way, it will have an impact not only on yourself personally, but also have an impact on your business further down the line.
Yeah, and I think the word that I want to pick up on there, and Alex, we talked about this a little bit off the air. Neither you and I are qualified to provide the level of support that some individuals might need in the industry, and we certainly recommend that people reach out to places like Beyond Blue, and there's a lot of fantastic organisations out there that can support our industry, but the word addiction, and that's the thing, to your point again, getting addicted to that serotonin, the endorphins. I love the rush of, finding that new client or getting that yes moment when we get a complex deal across the line. But again, what I'd caution brokers about is getting addicted to the right things. So get addicted to sustainability. And what do I mean by that? Well, get addicted to people around you that are supporting you in a holistic manner and not just one particular outcome. Get people around you that are able to have an honest and open conversation to you about what they're seeing and noticing about behaviors or about working hours, or if you are working weekends and stuff. The biggest, I think, one of the biggest mistakes that I think our industry unfortunately has got caught up into is that we think that the answer's always got to be yes. And it doesn't have to be. No is the 56th most used word in the English language. We actually need to bring it up the totem pole a little bit higher. And I'd love to see brokers saying no more, and not necessarily a hard no, but a no, this time frame doesn't work, or a no, not in that particular way. So just something to think about.
You know what? I'm going to park that, because I think there's probably a whole episode to deal with no, and working in sales. And I work with not just in the, with supporting my media sales team, but also sales, sort of teams in other areas, and understanding no and knowing when not to pursue something when you are growing a business and when there's a commercial outcome is so valuable. So I'm actually going to come back to that at some point. Look, one thing just whilst we're on the sort of the sort of the health and well-being and sort of the focal point, there's something which I'll just share this with you that I'm increasingly conscious of myself now in this modern era of technology, is that little thing called AI. Now, I'm not going to delve into that, but one thing I'll make an observation, and I don't know if this resonates with people tuning in, on this kind of a obsessive working kind of focus, I increasingly find myself, particularly at weekends when I'm not working, is going, I'll have an idea and I'll go, oh, I'll run that through the AI machine. It might be a marketing idea. It could be a concept. And there is I think a potentially very powerful, but also potentially very dangerous element in AI where you can end up going off down the AI rabbit hole of what is possible and coming up with many, many ideas, which AI facilitates immediately. In the old-fashioned way, we would, come up with an idea. You have to roll your sleeves up and grind away and put together a plan in the old pen and paper format. Now, and this is, I'm speaking personally, I go, I've got an idea. I'll run it through AI. Bam, suddenly I've got a whole marketing plan, and now I've got yet another thing for me to start thinking about that I may well end up abandoning doing.
Yeah, and AI has opened up possibilities that we would have never thought possible. And I think at this time of year, with the theme of what we're talking about today, which is that sort of halftime, that check-in, utilizing things like AI to understand the health of your business today is a fantastic way to be able to bring a whole bunch of data together and actually synthesize it into something that's digestible for you, whether that's, runoff rates from your back book, or it's, looking at your net of offset account from your commission reports, or it could be conversion rates end to end from lead all the way through to settlement. I mean, this is the time when, if I look at, and we might get into that now, is sort of the 4 or 5 areas that I would say brokers need to keep an eye on. The tech is one part of that solution, because it can stop you having to wait 3 and 6 months to look at these lag indicators that you should be acting on now. We should be using this technology to just support the decisions that we need to make into the future. So yes, AI is definitely a solution, and it will help you with this health check.
We're going to take just a quick break. What I'd like to do, Jason, I'd like to, when we come back, I'd just like to round off with sort of really looking at how do I actually take stock. So we're looking at this halftime break. We're looking at this, evaluating everything, but now just focusing on the business. If you could give some takeaways for our audience as to how I can actually measure. Let's assume that we're going in 6-month leaps.
Yep.
How do I evaluate the last 6 months, and how do I look and start to kind of consider if I'm on right track for the next 6 months ahead? Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Alex Whitlock, Jason back with you, Business Accelerator. We are considering mid-year evaluation of the business, where we are personally, where our business is heading. Are we on the right track? We're going to round off with really having a look at now. We sort of talked about where we are personally. We've considered some of the distractions and maybe some of the pitfalls that we all face as business owners. But on more practical terms now, I'd like to just, Jason, to give some insights into just some strategic takeaways to look back over the previous 6 months, maybe some things that you can tick off to know you're on the right track, and to know that, whether your break is 1 day or 6 days, that you're ready to start and keep going the way you're going.
Yeah, so Alex, I think at this time of the year, there's probably 4 or 5 measures that I keep a real close eye on. And ideally, there are literally hundreds of things I'd love business owners to measure in their business. But if you did nothing else but these 5, I'd be pretty happy. Look, the first one at this time of year would be really having a look at profitability. And I mean that not just at a business level, so looking at your net profit margin and understanding things like your cost to income ratio, but also looking at profitability per file. Now, what we're really looking to understand here is, is the business that I'm doing actually, is there a benefit for me here? Because a lot of brokers, and in fact, if I ask this question at conferences and even with coaching clients, 99% of brokers have no idea what the cost per file is, and what their profitability per file is. And is this a good deal for me? And if it's not profitable, then how do I make it profitable? How much more business do I need to get from that client, or more referrals that I get from that client? Or to our point before, should I actually even say no to that client? And that's a hard conversation to have. So profitability at a file and a business level is probably one of the big ones. The second one I'd start having a really good think about is efficiency. So there's a thing we call milestone reporting. Milestone reporting is the speed in which your file moves through each of the stages. So it might go from lead to appointment, appointment to application, application to conditional, to formal, to docs issue, docs return, etc. Now, what I'm really looking for is the speed in which that file moves through that process. When I understand that speed, I understand the types of files, whether that be construction or first home buyer, or it might be an investor, etc. I start understanding in line with the profitability of those files, particular banks, potentially particular staff members or brokers in my business, where the bottlenecks are, how long is it taking me to convert that lead? And all of these things start getting you to understand, is my business actually functioning properly? We get so lost in the fact that we're doing so many files, and files will go and settle, and that's fantastic. But we don't really go back and say, well, should I be doing that type of business? How quickly am I doing this business? How efficient is this business? Because the more we touch things, the less revenue you're effectively making on that file. So that then comes into things like straight through processing, which as an industry, we're still circa below 20% as a norm, which means that 80% of our files are being touched on a secondary basis by our banking partners, which is not great for us, them, or the client. So there's a couple of really big ones in there. And if I start looking at sort of more of the subtle ones, obviously customer satisfaction is a really interesting one at the moment. We don't measure customer satisfaction necessarily in the way that I think is a great way of doing things these days. Brokers have tendency to move away from hard measurements like Net Promoter Score, more traditional surveys and interviewing of clients to get really deep data. And we've moved into really just using things like testimonials and Google reviews as a canary in the mine shaft to work out whether our customers are happy or not. Now, I would challenge brokers on that. It's great to have these testimonials, and I love when I get them, but it's not a true reflection of the health of your customer experience. If you're only getting 5-star reviews, what I'd be more interested in is the 3s and the 2s and the 1s, and you will have them. But if we don't know and we don't get that feedback loop.
But it's really easy to manufacture 5-star Google reviews. Like I watch how real estate agents do it, and they will call you up and get you to do the 5-star. And I won't take you through the whole details, but Phil sold a property, and they actually went away and wrote a 5-star review for him and said, can you just approve this? Anyway, so I think this is really important. Satisfaction, customer satisfaction. 5-star reviews don't mean you're doing a 5-star job.
Correct.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
it's
you.
such an important thing. We might even come back to it another day. But so yeah, customer satisfaction, and you'll see the latest sort of studies coming out of places like Stanford and Harvard and stuff saying, look, rather than doing even NPS is a good example, you'd be better off actually doing an interview and actually calling up your client and spending half an hour with them and asking real questions about their experience if you want to find out, really important information. So profitability, when we look at our milestoning and our efficiencies, when we're looking at customer satisfaction. Another really big one for me, and I've been talking about this for a few years now, and really to me, this sits right at the top of the chart, is unique versus organic growth. And what I mean by that is when we think about on the 1st of January to the 31st of December, or from the 1st of July to the 31st of December this year, how many clients are actually in your book? How many loans are in your book? At the end of that period, how many new clients came into your book? How much business did you write from organic growth, existing clients either doing more business or refinancing their existing book? Because what I'm really looking at there, and why I find that number so important, that unique versus organic, is that unique clients help de-risk your business. We start divesting our risk away from individuals, because we've been watching runoff obviously increase over the last few years, especially with cashbacks. We've been heading sort of north of sort of 17% up to sort of low 20, 22, 23%. But I've seen them as high as 30% plus. Now, if you're not bringing new clients in and you've got runoff rates of 30%, then your business is going backwards. So that unique versus organic, I think we get very comfortable in the fact that, yes, we've had a great year. Yes, we wrote some good upfronts, but our business actually didn't grow. Our FUM actually didn't grow, which then starts to worry me as far as the ongoing value of your business as well. And again, maybe a discussion for another day. And I think the final one there, when we think about what's really going on in your business right now, there's sort of a few other measures, and I'll mention just a couple very, very quickly. Look, compliance sort of rounds out that sort of top 5. No matter what shape or form our industry likes to talk about compliance in, it is the backbone of why we will continue to succeed. If we don't place a priority on it, then I feel like it starts to move into the background. This needs to be, best interest duty, how we verify incomes, especially in a cyber risk world now. And then you'll speak to any expert and they will tell you now that we are in the midst of, it's going to be very difficult to tell a fake passport it already is, or a fake payslip. So really having a great relationship with your aggregator and their compliance team, being super curious about your compliance, not just, fending off a good score or an average score, but really working towards having a perfect score. So compliance isn't one that we talk a lot about, but I really want to make sure that we continue to keep that at the forefront so that our industry is not one that has, parliamentary overviews. Like there were some conversations over the last week in relation to the industry where, it's easy to have a bit of a drive-by at us. But when we think about what we have to do versus potentially what some of our other partners have to do, brokers are certainly held under certainly more scrutiny. And I don't mind that because I think we can really prove ourselves and that's a good thing.
I don't want to drill down too far into compliance because it's not really the focus of this podcast, but for the 25 years that I've been working in the media around mortgage broking, and I've been some unbelievably good fraud sessions I remember CBA did one probably in about early 2000s, ran by Kathy Cummings, and they had one of their chief sort of fraud people in, and the things that people, and I'm going back to really clever photocopying, honestly, with the technology that is available now, the threat and danger around fraudulent documentation is just off the dial.
It's frightening.
Brokers do everything with the best. The problem with fraud is you get caught unawares, unless you're part of a criminal syndicate where you are deliberately, you're a criminal, you're not a broker, but it's really dangerous for brokers. Fraudsters will look for people they can deceive.
Oh, and I'll don't forget as well, the industry, and I put myself into this category as well, is that, we're people pleasers. We just want to help. And
yeah. And if you've got a good story, and they're very clever.
And we don't like saying no, so therefore we want to help. We don't want to say no, and they're telling us what we want to hear, and that's to your point again, they're showing us what we need to see. And I just get brokers to remind themselves that there's no one deal that's worth your license. There's no one client that's worth getting yourself in trouble for. It's just not the case. So, if it doesn't feel right, again, I know it can be hard to say no, but if you're being broker shopped, and we know that happens with accountants, we know it happens with brokers.
We said on Broker Daily just earlier this week that ASIC has its focus on brokers. We kind of didn't dismiss it in many ways, I welcome it, because what it does is it means that anyone that's thinking about coming into broking with the wrong ideas will be just warned off. But hey, they will look, and it will be in the focal point. So.
And Alex, I just wanted to think, as we finish off today, is just remember, we've talked a lot about the business side of things there, but I would also get you to do a bit of a personal health check as well. And that might be, look, the measurements there can be obviously a bit more subjective, but you could ask yourself, how many days actually have I taken off? For me, it might be how many hockey matches have I missed for the first half. I missed one because I was interstate. But these little measures that are important to me are just as important as the business metrics as well. So what I'd get listeners to challenge themselves on is we've talked and given you some really clear thoughts about, say, a top 5, and I can provide you with a top 100 if you want some more metrics to have a look at. But I'd really encourage you to create a personal top 5 as well. What's 5 things that are important to me, my family, my health, my career, whatever it is, and don't dismiss them just because you get busy. Keep these things important. Use a vision board. I know that some people might find that a bit woo-woo and stuff, and I know I did for many years, and now I have them all over the place. So use the tools that work for you, but make sure you've got a balance between your personal needs and your business needs.
I think absolutely fantastic counsel there, Jason. I think it's really important. I mean, there's so much to to review in this podcast. Even in your closing comments, sort of considering profit, efficiency, customer satisfaction. Your unique versus organic growth. And then your compliance, even that just from a very business-focused thing is critical. I think having a sort of a review and a reset personally, we should be in business because we love it, we care about it, and we enjoy it. And I would say to people tuning in, knowing how hard people work, take time, young or old, to go see the doctor. Say, you know what? I work hard. I run a business. I have a job that has a lot of demand on me personally. I'd like to have a health check, get some blood tests done. It's pretty routine stuff. It's a 20-minute consultation with the doctor. You know what? You might just find something out that you need to know. So take good care of yourselves. Look after your business, look after yourselves. Jason, it's always a pleasure. We've run out of time.
As always.
I'm going to pick up on one or two of these themes, I think, for next week, and I'm not sure yet what they'll be. I'll probably spring it on you when we get together next week, so be prepared.
I look forward to it. For
everyone else, thanks so much for tuning in. Love having you with us. Don't forget, give us your feedback. Let us know what you think about Business Accelerator. And also, Jason, as well as giving a lot of time for this podcast, runs his own business, Broker Essentials. Do feel free to contact Jason if you are interested in speaking to him, to consult on how to improve your own business operations. We'll see you next week.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.